thank everyone for joining us for today's Stories from the Field. Like to point out a couple things. One, hopefully you noticed when the email blast went out and where we have it posted on our website that we have changed these over the past few months from being a weekly opportunity to then kind of a couple weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it needed. We have landed on at this time that we are blocking out every fourth Tuesday for these webinars. So you can kind of keep that on your calendar, as well as there'll still continue to be email blasts go out. If there's something timely that comes up and lends itself to have one in between, we can do that as well. Also, the Q&A box has been disabled, so you will be communicating through the chat box only. So if you have questions, please send those via the chat box. Also, in the past, I've had some folks that say they can't find a to everyone option when sending those chat messages. If you can scroll down and look to see if you have that everyone option, that's the best bet for sending in those questions. However, if you can't find that option, you don't have that option available, do not send your questions to just the host. Those go to me, and as I'm sure you're not surprised, none of us are in the same location. And when they just come to me, I'm the only one that sees those. So if you can't send those to everyone, if you can send those to all panelists, that would be fantastic. At least we know that all those folks that are there as presenters will be able to see those as well. And I think that's all of the housekeeping that I have today. So I am going to turn this over to Dwayne, and we'll hit the ground running.
Thank you, Heike. So for those who don't know me, this is Dwayne Shumate, Director of Employment Community Membership for the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And today's Stories from the Field is going to focus on returning to community and employment settings. Our panelists for today are Molly Shiner, who is with Center for Human Services. Molly is the Director of Community Living Services for CHS. We also have with us Kim Buckman, and Kim is the TCM Director for County Connections. And then we also have Candace Cunningham with us. And Candace is a self-advocate and also works at UMKC IHD as a technical assistance manager with the People First Project. Candace also is a recently announced winner of the Mental Health Champions Award. And so thank you, Kim, Candace, and Molly for your all's participation. So one of the things as we focus today's discussion, I know that there's been a lot of technical assistance provided by the Division of Developmental Disabilities around organizational preparedness, information around monitoring requirements and personal protection planning and just pandemic planning. But one of the things we really wanted to focus on today, though, was planning and coordination just around the individual. And so I'm going to share with everyone here my screen, and hopefully I do this correctly. So what you should be seeing is the Division of Developmental Disabilities COVID-19 page. So the resource that we just kind of wanted to spotlight to frame today's discussion can be found on this page underneath the resource and videos link. It's the very first link here that is called Return to Work and Community Activities Planning Tool. We showcased this tool a little bit last month. We just want to spend a little bit more time this month kind of talking about it. This is a tool that was developed off of a template that was initially developed in Vermont. And Sandy Kaiser, who is one of the Employment First specialists in Missouri, did a lot of work on really going through and kind of reformatting this tool. We will have further training on this tool in the weeks to come on how it can be used. But that particular link is one that we left as a Word document because, again, this is an optional planning tool, and we really wanted to provide an opportunity for folks to access this, download it, and customize it for their own individual needs. Again, this is a tool that can be used by a support coordinator, could be used by a service provider, it could be used by an individual or family sitting around their kitchen table on considerations that one may need to make about returning to community activities and or looking at returning to employment. So this is a fillable document. It asks just a series of questions. There's responses that can be provided to where if someone is ready to return to the community, they can just put that I'm very ready and identify what some of those support needs might be. Again, there's a series of questions around general planning analysis, some questions also around kind of looking at health and whether or not the individual is at risk of increased health issues with acquiring or being exposed to COVID-19. There are things around safety analysis around whether the individual is able to wear a face covering, if they're able to understand physical distancing and practice social distancing, things around sanitizing. And again, each of these you can go through and provide answers to those questions, which hopefully then will drive the types of supports that may be needed, either through the provider or coordination as part of the person-centered planning process. So we also have areas around the workplace, things that should be considered for those who are returning to work, and types of circumstances and environments and situations that they may need to explore. We look at what type of steps has the employer taken. And again, these are all things that can be identified as part of that discussion. We're looking at, we've also added here for day and community activities, similar types of questions, things to be considered when looking at a setting or resuming services in a setting for that specific individual, what type of support needs they may have. It also looks at things around just the home analysis for those individuals that may be residing in a residential program. It looks at how many individuals does the person reside with. Do they have that ability to isolate and quarantine within the residential program? Is physical assistance required? Again, just a multitude of questions with the opportunity to go in and select answers to kind of help with coordinating services and supports. And then we also look at transportation needs. Again, it is one of those things, especially individuals that may not have their own transportation. There's definitely support coordination that needs to occur when considering how an individual may be getting to the community activities or getting to work. We also ask some general questions about the environment as the individual lives in, whether or not there are elevated outbreaks of COVID-19, whether the site of the setting where services might be received is in an area where there's an elevated outbreak, and if they reside with others, do the direct support professionals who they work with or the others with whom they may reside, are they in areas with elevated outbreak? And then ultimately what we have here at the bottom is just an informal box to indicate what decisions are being made, why they're being made, and what type of support might need to be coordinated to help the individual. Again, this is just an optional tool. Folks may complete all of it, part of it, none of it. But again, we just wanted to provide an option for individuals as they're looking at resuming services. So with that tool in mind, what we wanted to kind of explore today with the panel are some of the considerations that they're making as they begin to resume and return to services. So first off, I'm going to start with a kind of a round robin discussion, and we will begin with Candace. And Candace, if you could, can you just answer for us, are you resuming community-based activities currently? And just from an individual perspective, what type of safeguards have you implemented?
I've only done a little bit. The community-based activities I've done is with my family, so going to family's house. So, and like going to the store or something, I've gone in the morning time and always make sure that I'm wearing my mask and have my hand sanitizer, just to know that I'm safe and trying to keep everyone else safe, as the best way I can.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, from a TCM perspective, how are you all assuring individuals have that opportunity to resume community-based activities, and what types of organizational safeguards have you all implemented?
It's really done on a case-by-case basis. We're looking at each individual and working with the planning team, which obviously includes that individual and their provider, their guardian, and really just trying to think about what the potential risks are for that individual, what their needs are, and what level they are comfortable being at right now. So obviously, after that discussion, we're really just trying to develop that plan for reintegration into the community or to work. For some individuals, that never stopped. And so we're just working with them to ensure that they continue to do that as safely as possible. Organizationally, we are doing that pre-screening before we go out and meet with anybody, but we're also using that to kind of educate individuals so that they can recognize what are those symptoms or those signs that they need to be cautious of before they go out into the community. And then obviously just sharing with them information and resources on that PPE so that they have what they need to be able to go back out in the community.
Okay, thank you, Kim. And Molly, as a service provider, I have no doubt that people are resuming services, but can you talk just a little bit about the types of services that are occurring and what you've considered from an organizational safeguard? And it looks like we may have just lost Molly. Molly, do you still have your audio? Okay, we'll catch back up with.
Are you there? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I don't know why you lost me video-wise. Can you see me now?
Yep.
Okay. I would agree with a lot of what Kim said. I mean, that's how we've been going about things. We have a comprehensive, our agency does, COVID plan that the leadership team worked tirelessly on. A shout out to Debbie and Kim who are on here. But in terms of, for example, I'm over the day hab services and the residential programs. In terms of our folks who had employment, or we wanted to make sure they could keep their employment even during the shutdown time. So we got our heads together with the teams and just came up with everything we could possibly think of to protect them and to protect those that they live with, including, like I said, PPE, if they lived in a group setting, coming back home, immediately going and taking a shower, putting their clothes in the laundry before having contact with other people. We've done education. And that goes for both the home and the day hab settings. We have opened day programming in one area and are reopening the other next week. And same thing, we are sanitizing, taking temperatures, doing a survey, training the staff trained. Everybody wears a mask, except for those individuals with disabilities that prevent that. We're not denying access to them. We're just going to keep them from having contact with others that don't have masks. So we have set up several different trainings for them to understand why this is important. Residential-wise, we are partly open to the community. We've started slowly, but with the exception of those that are doing employment who stayed out, we are going a little slower, but we're back out and about, just not on a large scale into places that present high risk. So, like I said, we've trained, masks, sanitizing, all those things we can to keep everyone safe.
Okay, thank you, Molly. So Candace, we'll go back around to you. So what are some of the concerns that you yourself experienced or continue to experience when making that decision about returning to community services? Are there certain pieces of information that you're needing to feel more comfortable?
I think one of my biggest concerns is knowing that other people will wear the mask and, to listen to the CD, the guidelines and knowing, um, and also just knowing that we get new information of this COVID, so knowing what is white and, not white, but um, what's the new information that they can give me in people first language. So if I don't understand what the guidelines are, they can explain it to me in a way that I can understand it.
So as far as from kind of running the People First chapter in Missouri, are you hearing certain things from families and individuals on their primary concerns?
I think that one of the biggest things is being closed down or not being social, and that's understandable, but you have to be safe in that way. And I don't think that we broke down the information for other people to understand why we are doing this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, from the TCM perspective, what are some of the types of concerns that you're hearing from families? Are there some common trends of concerns and type of information that they're needing to make informed decisions?
Yeah, as far as employment goes, I know one of the concerns that we're hearing from families is when an employer requires mandatory testing and the individual not being able to tolerate that, especially more than once. So that's kind of caused some individuals not to pursue returning to work yet because they can't tolerate that mandatory testing. And so I know that's been a concern of families. And then it's that fine balance. We know providers have that responsibility to safeguard people, but families are struggling sometimes with if the individual, their family member doesn't have those underlying health conditions and is able to use the PPE and is able to social distance, but there's blanket policies for that organization that are keeping that individual from going out, or maybe because their housemate has underlying health conditions. I think that's been a concern and a struggle for families, trying to keep everybody safe, but yet maybe their family members ready to go back out and to do things in the community, but they're limited because of those organizational policies or because of a housemate and their conditions. So I think those are our primary concerns right now. Just trying to balance that between what an organization's responsibility is and what they have to do to keep people safe and what an individual wants to do.
I'm sure that makes for some lively person-centered planning meetings.
Yes, it does.
So Molly, from the service provider perspective, are there standard kind of concerns that you're hearing from families and individuals, and what type of information may be needed to help them be more confident in the decisions that they're making?
Well, I think using tools does help, like the one that you presented and we've received in the past. Something to go by, to look at every one of those issues and then try to make an informed decision. Like I said, Kim does a very good job of speaking for the service providers as well, because the exact same things she's talking about are the things that have had some lively conversations, team meetings, because you're just, as a provider, you're so concerned about keeping people safe, as are, in most cases, the families. And it's just flipping that trigger and being comfortable, by sharing all of the things that you have in place, the training you've provided. And, some of the concerns we've had is, well, we're not comfortable. Say this person has gone to employment or gone out in the community with public transportation, such as Oates. They don't they're okay with them going to the community if we take them as a provider. They're not so comfortable with the generic community provider, even though that's more independent for the individual and more natural. But we've then gone through with these others like Oates and what have you, what all safeguards they have in place. And most of the time, we've been able to assure families that that is indeed safe for them. But yes, it's the risk of the safety versus and the concern for wanting to protect people versus their want and desire and ability to get out in the community. And it's a hard balancing act. And I think we have families on both sides. Most of ours have erred on the side of caution and keeping safe, but we're starting to have a lot of people ready to do that. So anyway, it's been lively, and I think everybody, regardless of their opinion, seems to want what's best for the individual. We just all have different ways of thinking that, and we just have to use tools like the one that you have developed to try to come to some agreement.
So Molly, are there tools like the one that we shared that you're using that you could share with others, or are you in the process of developing additional tools
Well,
you would like to share
honestly,
with others on the call?
we had a tool, and I think we may have gotten from DMH, but I'm not sure because it didn't look like an official form. And then we looked at your tool, and we kind of used it to make sure we were asking all the right questions. So I guess in a sense, we combined tools. Most of them, they had similar stuff. The one that you all have developed is more in depth, and it did identify some more questions for us. So, I mean, I have no problem sharing, but I think yours covers it.
Okay, thank you. So Kim, are you using a tool similar to the one shared, or how are you helping families and individuals identify maybe those specific areas where some of the concerns are at, to where you can coordinate very specific supports, as opposed to someone just making a general blank statement of we're comfortable or not comfortable, without really isolating where those areas of comfort and discomfort are at, but also balancing that dignity of risk?
We've not had a formalized tool that we've been using. What we did was really just go through each area of life and think about what are the things that we need to consider. For example, under health and safety, like what are those health risks? What are those underlying conditions that maybe place them at more risk? When we talk about community living, we talked about transportation and access and their ability to be safe in the community. So we just looked at all of those different areas of life and thought about potential questions and things we need to ask. We kind of put that on our amendment to our plans. We created just a template for our staff to use. But what we did find with doing it that way, at times, that some of the information that was being put is kind of a generic information, and it wasn't real focused on each individual in their particular situation. So it just kind of became generalized. So when you sent us that tool, Dwayne, I shared that out with some of our team members. And while it's lengthy and some of them were a little hesitant about that, they do like how it's laid out, where you can ask the questions. You've got those particular responses, which kind of helps you measure that individual's readiness to be able to go back out into the community safely. And then it kind of leads into that more specific planning. So we've just been kind of looking at those generalized questions under each area of life. But we like the idea of having something a little more formalized that could kind of take some of that subjectivity out of it.
Okay, thank you. So Candace, from People First, do you all have any tools or resources that you provide individuals or families as they look at making their own decisions to exercise their protected rights under Olmstead and Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act?
we go off of the SALTech, which is connected with Green Mountain Self Advocacy. And they have made tools that help people post language, and so we try to send them either the link and yeah, or an example of the tool to each other people post members, and also we the Green Mountain Self Advocacy has webinars each week for self advocates on different categories, but most of them were of COVID, so we try to send those out so they can actually watch it and participate and talk to somebody else about it.
Okay, and for those who are curious about Green Mountain Self Advocates, I've posted the website for those programs and resources in the chat box. So if anybody's wanting to visit Green Mountain Self Advocates and see all the tools and resources they have, you should be able to access it through the hyperlink in the chat box. So let's go back to Molly. I have 2 more questions remaining for each of the panelists, but we'd really love to hear from those who are attending. If you do have questions that you would like to ask any one of the panelists, please make sure you put it in the chat box. Again, if you would, direct it to all attendees, so that way each of the panelists can see it, but then also the people participating are able to see the questions. But we definitely would love to have this be an interactive discussion with each of you all who are participating, and not just focus on the 5 questions that I identified for the panel. So as we jump into our 4th question, Molly, how is the person-centered planning team working together to assure choice and coordinate the supports to assist individuals? So I know that earlier you kind of talked a little bit about from your own role, but how are you all working together as a team to ensure that the individual's rights are being supported, and that it's just not one particular entity that may be voicing a little bit more stronger perspective than the other, but really working together to accomplish the individual's wishes and desires?
Well, like I said, we pretty much do everything as a team. Sometimes that team is a support coordinator, the family, the individual, and our staff. Sometimes it's just with the individual and their guardian. But what we try to do is, as you know, we've identified, because of using the tool, what the risks are, and to come to some agreement, acknowledging what those risks are based on a multitude of things, including the county that you reside in and the number of cases and how fast they're increasing. And then try to make decisions that reflect the wants and needs of the individual, understanding the risks that are involved. And when we are taking those risks, we make sure that everyone is in agreement on those. And we go a lot based on what the individual has to say. So it is a collaborative effort. At this point in time, I mean, for the most part, the whole team is involved in that. We've had a lot of, like I said, discussions, and most of the time, I'd say 99% of the time, we've all been in agreement. And so we've been very fortunate, and we've been able to put things in place to reassure people. And so the individuals always want to go. So, but some of them understand the seriousness and also want to know how we are protecting them and how they can protect themselves. So we do training, we've made videos, we've done all sorts of things. So anyway, I just feel like the teams have been able to work to come to a balance between that. And at a certain point in time, I have to say, as a provider, it's our responsibility to keep people safe, but it's also our responsibility to make sure they're able to access the community. And that's, like I said, that's a very difficult thing as a provider, but yet, you know, at some point in time, you have to just be assured that you've done everything you can as far as education, PPE, everything else, to assure that that we're making sure they're as safe as possible, and we just go from there. And like I said, it's an individual thing. I mean, there are people that are going and doing everything. They're working at Walmart, and there are those that, because of their health risks, are not getting out that much, maybe to the park, because the risk is just too high to be in an enclosed area. So anyway.
And Kim, from the planning process with many different people with different priorities and needs and concerns, as part of that planning process, how are you all assuring that you're working collectively in the direction in which the individual and family is wanting to support?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page as Molly. It really takes a lot of communication, constant communication with the providers and with families, and really working to identify, and we're trying to keep that voice for the individual to make sure that we identify what their needs and their wants are, and really working with them to help make sure providers are staying up to date on what's coming out with COVID updates, and supporting them through that, and really just trying to maintain that communication and making sure that what's in place today, if it's something that's maybe limiting their ability, that's not necessarily how it's going to stay, and just continuing to work and keep that, what those wants and needs are at, that we don't lose sight of those. And so we're just maintaining that constant communication with our providers, and with the individual and with their families, and just really trying to be a support to all of them, because we know that those providers have the individual's best interest at mind. And so we want to be able to be a support to the providers as well as to the individual. So we're trying to be that go-between, and help them think through those processes.
So Kim, as kind of a follow-up question, I'm sure you support individuals who are still of school age, and the whole concept of stay-at-home schooling and even returning to the school. I mean, what types of challenges or nuances do you all face when a school district is part of that planning process, and how has that worked with people returning to school?
That's definitely been a challenge. We have some of our school districts that we work with who have returned to school. And so we were able to really work with them and just, prepare, make sure that they had the necessary safety precautions in place. We have others who are doing remote learning, and it's been really difficult. I'd say technology is the biggest barrier that we have there, and making sure that not only do they have the equipment, but they have the internet access. And so we're working with local internet providers, with Missouri Assistive Technology and other places to really try to make sure all of that is lined out for folks. We've also been working closely with the special education departments at our schools and sitting in on those conversations and those planning meetings, to help families advocate for what they want to see. Because just the school, again, like what we were talking about with providers, having blanket policies in place that doesn't always fit for every individual. And so we were really trying, before school started, we worked with individuals and families to prepare for those conversations so that they could go to that meeting and they'd know, this is what I'd like to see happen, understanding that there may need to be some modifications or changes to that, but what our overall goal is. And so just really trying to work with families to understand the precautions schools are having to put in place, as well as making sure that they have the equipment and the support they need to be successful.
Okay, thank you. And Candace, again, from that person-centered planning process, I know we've heard instances around the state where there may be providers that have blanket policies kind of similar to what Kim has referenced. as a self-advocate and a person who is receiving support coordination, what words would you share out there with folks on, from a self-advocate perspective, on the importance of your voice being heard and people looking at supporting your choices and interests, and being flexible on any organizational policies?
I think on that, what you said is your voices, so it's all voices that need to be heard, or all voices that provide those support and try to get out there. So it's just taking the time to sit down or Zoom meet with the person and seeing what they actually need, and just making sure that you're not what they said isn't what you got want them to say, but what they actually said, if that makes sense. And just taking time, and I know we have those 5 months call or whatever, but taking time to actually seeing them through Zoom or WebEx instead of calling them. Because when you call them, the facial expression is sometimes more important than how you hear it in the voice. That's my thought as just one self-advocate.
Okay, thank you. And Candace, we'll just snake back around and we'll go right back to you with the last prepared question that I have, and we will see if we have any questions that pop up in the chat box. But from your perspective, what support, if any, would you need to have to be able to instill confidence in individuals and families on their ability to begin to resume? I mean, what types of supports or information do you think folks may need?
I think, and I know this is on new COVID, everything is changing daily, but having that constant, like, well, a face mask when you're in a community, in like a store or something, or just that constant information, because I forget. I can forget what you said 3 minutes ago, So I need that constant, hey, you need to do this, but like a reminder, I guess, but gently and not hammering it down on the person. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you, Candace. And in the chat box, if you haven't seen it, Molly's referencing how amazing you are, Candace. So I think there's no doubt as to why Candace is one of the mental health champions this year for all of her advocacy work. So Kim, from your perspective, what, if any, could be done to better support you and the staff that you support with being able to instill greater confidence in families and individuals?
I think something like this tool, something that can show individuals and give them an idea of what level of risk they really are at. Because I know there's a lot of speculation and wondering that we just don't know enough about COVID to really truly know. But something that's going to help people kind of determine what level they really are at as far as risk goes. And I think that that's going to help individuals. I think that would help providers and us to really think about those policies and those practices of getting people back out. And I think just, again, that open communication. I know DMH has put out a lot of guidance and a lot of support, but I think sometimes just that one-on-one conversation with those providers, maybe who are struggling to figure that out and to open back up, maybe having that conversation with them and supporting them through that process.
Okay, thank you. And Molly, any additional support or information that that could be provided from your perspective to better support you and the staff you support and the individuals and families you support?
I think Candace and Kim have done a great job of answering the question. I will just say some examples of when people have had concerns, families, guardians, about things something an individual wants to do. What we do is we call wherever it is, find out their face mask policy, find out certain things to reassure the families. So sometimes information in the tool, which like you said, Kim said, it identifies truly what level of risk they are at. And I guess I'm saying being prepared, but basically to help us, we just need to continue as a provider to get support in things like any additional ideas that come along, which can better prepare folks to be safely in the community. You know, I just feel like the support from DMH has been very helpful, the Friday calls and what have you, all the tools that have come out, both for us as providers and for individuals and families has been phenomenal. But like I said, a lot of times, you know, we're just kind of finding our way through this like everybody else and trying to do what's in the best interest of the individual and what they want and need.
Okay, thank you. So I don't see that we've had any questions yet in the chat box. So we will wait just a few seconds to see if we do have any other questions. While we're waiting on to see if there is any questions in the chat box, do any of the panelists have a question that they would like to ask of one of the other panelists?
I'll just share a question that was asked to me privately through chat, and Molly, maybe see if you've had this. But with transportation providers and the precautions or changes that they have made, has there been any particular tools or letters? I don't know if you had any that were sent to folks that use transportation services. Do you have any? Did you have anything with transportation providers that you use, Molly, or that your folks use?
That we as a provider, as a transportation provider use? Is that
Yeah.
what you're asking? Well, what we did when we've had these team calls recently regarding opening back up our day services, them of the requirements and all the safety precautions that we've done. Now, you know, I have been thinking about that it might not be a bad idea to have a little FAQ in a place that they can call if they have questions about that. But mainly, once we've answered the questions that we know, or if I can't get them from our transportation department, we've asked. And once we give these responses, generally we found that most people are assured. And like I said, we've also done phone calls with other transportation providers to make sure that they are following safety precautions. And fortunately, they are at this point in time. But I would say our agency is doing temperature checks before they get on the vehicles even. So, I mean, we're doing quite a bit. So, and kudos to providers who are doing that. But like I said, as I don't have like a form letter or a letter that we've sent out.
Okay.
So I know we've talked a little bit in general about just access and returning to the community in employment settings. Can each of you all share just a success story of someone who's continued to work or become employed since the pandemic's begun? And I'll let whoever wants to go first.
I'll go. I said, Kim, I think you know Kim Anderson. She's our Director of Employment Services, and we have worked together amazingly for for all of our individuals that we share to be able to continue to work. But what the neat success stories are is the people who have gained employment during the COVID crisis, as it's opened up some opportunities for people who, for whatever reason, did not want to work during COVID due to maybe higher benefits and unemployment benefits or whatever. But we've had people hired during this, and I go back to someone in our housing that had due to COVID had lost their job and went in and interviewed and was able to obtain employment that he very much enjoys. And Kim's staff have been amazing at supporting them. And I guess I just wanted to share that we've had not only people keep their employment, a lot of people keep it. Those who lost it, a lot of them have gotten it back, and some who were not employed at all have gained employment. So, but I think that we've really worked hard, even when, like I said, there were transportation issues. We made sure we worked it out, what have you, to make sure people were able to stay employed.
Yeah, we've had a couple of situations where people have obtained employment through this pandemic as well. So it was just kind of exciting to see that there's still progress with that. One lady worked at a sheltered workshop for 8 years. She started there right after graduating high school. And during all of this, while the workshop was closed down for a little while, she went out and she has gotten a job at a convenience store in the kitchen. And so she's now working in competitive employment. And so that was pretty exciting to see that. And then we had another gentleman who was working competitively, but due to the requirements at his job site with the mandatory testing repeatedly, because it was a nursing home, ended up not going back to that job, but has gotten another job in the community where he doesn't have to meet that requirement. So it worked out for him as well. So it's exciting to see when there's progress still, even when it's a difficult time.
And Candace, are you aware of any success stories that you've heard from other self-advocates or for yourself that have occurred through the pandemic?
One success story that I've heard from a close friend is that working with her son with this pandemic, she found out how she can do, or he can do the job. So it's kind of I think that's awesome. There's different way to do jobs that we all know, but honestly, I look at him as a little brother, so it's like I'm proud of him, of course. So I think that's cool that we could all do jobs, and they could take. Kim could do it a different way than Molly and myself, but we could all do the same job, So that's just cool to me.
Okay, so I think I have not seen any additional questions come in. So I think we will be giving people 11 minutes of their afternoon back. I just want to thank each of the panelists for being willing to participate and volunteer to speak about supporting individuals and returning to community settings and employment settings. And in closing, actually, Candace, I'll give you the final word. Any parting words from a self-advocate perspective that we all should keep in mind?
Just know that our self-advocate isn't the same, and we all do different. We can all succeed in different ways, but succeed at the same level. Just give us attention, time.
Okay, and actually, just real quickly, I'm sorry, Corey did ask one question. From a provider perspective, have you had issues with individuals complying with protocols around COVID with what to do after return to community? And if so, how have you addressed those issues? So for folks who have returned back to community settings or employment settings, have you had issues with individuals complying with the protocol within those settings, and how have you handled those circumstances?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, either you or Kim.
Well, I was just going to say we have not had non-compliance as of yet, so with our standards, but it probably will happen at some point, and I guess it would be a one-on-one conversation with that individual, you know, to see if that's what they really wanted to be in the community, and if we wanted to be safe. That would, like I said, that would might be my guess, is again reminding someone of the importance to keep them safe and to keep families safe, and other people in the community safe. So if you don't do it for yourself, do it for the others.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's actually been pretty surprising, I think, in some situations, the level of compliance that we have had with the protocols. Sometimes folks that we thought maybe wouldn't be able to tolerate the measures that were put in place have done really well with it. I would say also, though, that sometimes we're starting to get a little tired of it. So we're starting to see some frustrations appear with that. But I don't necessarily think it's non-compliance with the protocols. I think everybody has done really well with handling the safety measures that have had to be put in place.
All right. Well, thank you to you all for your participation, and again, congratulations, Candace, on being named a mental health champion this year. And with this, we will conclude today's call. Thank you all.